You're welcome to this episode of Walk with G Links. We are getting some great sun out here and it just makes everyone smile. So I hope you're smiling today, wherever you are all over the world that you are watching this. I hope you're smiling, and if not, I hope this makes you smile. All right, let's get into what we have for today. Today, my focus is on environment, the power of the environment. And this is not restricted to where you live or how the location or whatever it may look like. It's not restricted to that. I'm thinking of environment in the light of how I raise my children, the environment I raise my children. I'm thinking of it in the light of the environment I walk. I'm thinking of it in light of the environment I create at home. You know, environment can be wherever you find yourself that has the capacity to influence who you become. I love that. Wow. I wasn't even planning for that. That has the power of influence to transform who you become. That is your environment. When one form of ecosystem, wherever we find ourselves, whatever group you find yourself, it's an environment. A group of friends, that's your environment. You know, your family, that's your environment. So what is your environment? How does it influence your decisions? How is it influencing who you are becoming? Very, very important thing that we're going to be looking at today. And, I started meditating on this a while ago, and just thought I should just bring it to your attention. And you will find a story that resonates so well with this in Genesis chapter 33, and I'm going to read from verse 1 to verse 4. It said, I'm reading from the NIV version. It said, Jacob looked up and there was Esau coming with 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and 2 female servants. He put the female servants and their children in front, Leah and her children next, and Rachel and Joseph in the rear. He himself went on ahead and bowed down to the ground 7 times as he approached his brother. What a phenomenal story that we just read. I've meditated on that thing a lot of time, and it baffles me how environment can impact who you truly become at the end of the day. Now, when you flip your mind back to the life of Jacob and Esau, you realize that they started as 2 brothers who were at each other's throat. One desired the firstborn. Some people say the first despised his birthright, despised his role as the firstborn because of a morsel of porridge, But beyond that, they were separated at some point in time because Rebekah feared that Esau was going to kill Jacob. So she sent Jacob back to her own family. And then, of course, Esau continued to live in the land of promise. Remember that. Esau continued to live in the land of promise. Now, Esau was successful in his own right at the end of the day. Jacob was also successful in his own space at the end of the day. Bible says God gave him so much. There's a unique wisdom that God gave him that even despite the fact that his environment was so hostile. And I pray that irrespective, I'm praying for you now, that irrespective of how hostile your environment may be, you will thrive. Irrespective of how challenging your environment may be, sometimes you may not be able to get out of that environment because maybe the decision is not, you don't have the capacity to make that decision. But I'm praying for you that you will thrive in that environment. Maybe you're working in a hostile environment and you're really believing that I want to get out of this place. I want to be in a place that where I feel accepted, where I feel I'm not different, where I feel I belong and I can contribute. And you may not be able to make that decision now because you probably have not found another role. I'm praying that even despite how challenging that place will be, maybe you are going to thrive. So Jacob was in this environment where his supposed uncle, that was his mother's brother, was hostile to him. He enslaved him, to get the wife of his dreams. And in the middle of the night, he was given someone else. What an uncle. May we not have people like that in our lives. And if you have such people, I pray God will separate you from them. It's uncle kind of used the slave of hand and give him someone else that he wanted. So he had to be enslaved again, to get his actual desire, the woman that he truly desired. And of course, when it was time for him to start building wealth, everything was set up against him. When you can go back and read it from Genesis, all the way from 30, 31, 32, you begin to realize how much Laban set him up to fail. Laban truly set him up to fail. So the environment was very hostile. And despite it, he still thrived. He succeeded. He did everything that was needed to be done. And at the end of the day, he could not even walk away. He had to run away. That was how bad that environment was. But meanwhile, let's flip our mind back to Esau. Remember, I told you that you remember Esau still was in the land of promise. Something must have happened to Esau from the point that we last read of him, where the Bible said he was plotting in his heart that he was going to kill his brother, to the point where we are now reading about him in Genesis 33. That all of a sudden, we see a man that has become truly prosperous. According to Bible history, you realize that Abraham had just less than 400 men as soldiers. So he had his own private army. But Esau had surpassed even Abraham's private army. 400 men were with him. I don't think Jacob could boast of 400 men, because back in those days, having men around you was a sign of opulence, was a sign of wealth, was a sign of influence. So imagine he had 400 men. He was a CEO that had 400 employees. The Bible just said that Jacob had servants, and you have to understand that there's a clear distinction between just servants and men. It was like a whole army that he had. So I began to look at that how can your environment begin to mold who you become? And I believe that was what Jacob saw that made him realize that, wait, something is fundamentally wrong. Something is fundamentally wrong, that made him seek the face of God, so that God could turn his, and maybe that was also the reason why he knew that he had to leave Laban's house. I pray that even if you are not aware of how your environment is damaging your influence, damaging your circumstances, your eyes will be open from this podcast, and you'll begin to walk away from hostile situations, from challenging environments, and you begin to go into God so that it will settle you in the right place, so that you may thrive in the mighty name of Jesus. So, what kind of environment are we raising our children? Are we raising them in comforting environments? Are we raising them in environments where they thrive? When you look at statistics tells us that between environment and formal training, that's formal education, environment trumps formal education in the area of influence by 70 to 90% of the time. It influences more. Formal education from what research says, reinforces what environment has established already. So that's why they say that a child that is raised in a frugal family may outperform, a small, a gentle family may outperform a chaotic child, probably raised in a wealthy home, because of the environment the child is being raised. So a lot of times we have to begin to look at these things in the light of, do I have the power to create my environment, or am I subject to the environment I find myself? So those are two mentalities that people have. Sometimes we find ourselves in an environment and we just adapt to that environment, and we take it as the way of life. We take it as, you have to constantly be in a state of mind where you are able to challenge what you had previously known by truth that you have come across. So this is what I mean. They say that a fool at 40 is a fool forever. And I believe that sometimes people, where they turn to it, before in the old time, when you get to a certain age, you feel like you've known everything. At no point, and that's what I've realized from a lot of people, that in their 60s, they're in their 90s, and they're still learning, because there is room for growth. There is room to come into a new level of knowledge where you realize that, you know what? I think what I knew is obsolete. What I knew is outdated. Now I have access to new information so that I can make better decisions now. So are you caught from the mentality that I can create my environment, or I'm just going to lay down and allow the environment to walk over me? I'm just going to accept wherever I find myself, I'm just going to accept it. We say in Canada, a lot of time, the environment you come into impacts your trajectory in Canada. That means if you come into Canada and you get into an environment that is choking, that doesn't allow you to accept that you can actually do great things in Canada, that is it. That is what you will get. But you come into an environment where people are able to express, people are able to find new frontiers, you will all suddenly realize that you are also able to do the same thing as well. And I've been a recipient of the latter, where I was received by people who are global thinkers, who believe that there is no hindrance, there is no impossibility to who you can become in Canada. And that's why a lot of people sometimes look at my career journey and they say, oh, wow, you've been able to do this. So I want you to know that environment is very crucial to who your children are going to become. Environment is very crucial to how you fulfill your own purpose in life. I want you to begin to look around you and begin to look at your environment. Is my environment a place of growth? Is my environment a place where I thrive? Or am I just struggling in this environment? Am I finding it hard to move ahead because of the environment I found myself? Then you have to go to God and ask God to give you a new name. Ask God to give you a new name, to put you in the right environment, to give you the right people. Sometimes many of us are just being bogged down because we just have the wrong set of people around us. And you should not be afraid to separate yourself. Let me not use the word cut, to separate yourself from the wrong environment so that you can find the right set of people. And this is also going for those who are maybe believing God for future partners as well. Sometimes you are entangled in a relationship that is not going anywhere. How do you want to really find the person that is going to take you to your purpose-fulfilled life? To your purpose-fulfilled life. So I want you to begin to look at these things, look at your environment, and begin to ask God, is this the environment that will allow me to succeed, that will allow me to thrive? God has created an environment for you so that you may thrive. God has created an environment for your children to thrive. You can create that environment by your words, by your words. You can create the right environment for your children by your words. You can create the right environment by what you do with the time you spend with your children. You can create the right environment. In your workplace, you can also create the right environment as well. Around you, you can be a center of positive influence around you, irrespective of whatever the external. There's some environments that are, according to Steve Covey, right, where you know that there's a center of influence, and there are things that you cannot also control of as well. So what you can control, create the environment you can control. Create the environment where you thrive. And I know that as you follow these things through, as you begin to look into your environment, suddenly your eyes will be open and you'll be able to get out of hostile and challenging environments and create the environment God truly desires for you and your family and your work. As you go out today, let today be a blessed day for you. Bye.